So, you want to know more about what MMORPGs are, do you? This is SnubQuest, and I've played many MMORPGs over the years, from MMORPG giants such as World of Warcraft, Final Fantasy XIV, and Guild Wars 2, to other popular MMORPGs such as Lost Ark, RuneScape, Guild Wars 1, and Terra. I played them all. Growing up, I've even enjoyed MMOs some may not even heard of, such as Silk Road Online, Knights Online, and Myth War 2. So, what is an MMORPG? When we talk about an MMORPG, it can be really confusing. Today, we will start to dissect the acronym of MMORPG and attempt to thoroughly understand what it means to play one. Let's get started. MMORPG stands for Massively Multiplayer Online Role-Playing Game. But what does it mean to be massively multiplayer? When using the term massively multiplayer to describe a game, it can be really generic. Does massive multiplayer mean 5 people? 10 people? 100? As the genre has evolved over the years, there's a certain level of expectation when it comes to the amount of players that exist within an MMORPG to describe the massively multiplayer part of an MMO. The expectation is that when entering an MMO, there must be enough players to encourage an active economy and also enough players to encourage either a competitive community and/or cooperative gameplay. And this expectation is also expected to hold at all times of the day. In other words, persistence. This means that if one player logs off for the day, it would not disrupt another player's experience of the game's economy, community, or gameplay. So let's break it down. In order to have an active economy, there must be items, materials, or things that exist in the world that players want. And in order to obtain these things, a player must spend their time and effort to obtain them. And since they are spending their time and effort to obtain them, it must be that they are not actively or not currently in pursuit of obtaining other things that exist in the world. So while one player might be getting exceptionally skilled at one aspect of the game, obtaining a certain item, another player might be getting skilled at a completely different part of the game, and both players can mutually agree to trade their goods for the other. Additionally, the expectation of an MMO is that the player base is large enough to support a competitive community. A competitive community can mean a multitude of things. An MMO can have PvP or player versus player, where players can engage in combat with one another, normally to display a certain level of skill or item progression one has over the other. Which also leads to another aspect of competitive community, item progression. Obtaining items in the form of armor or weapons can be seen as a way of displaying one's mastery over the game. The best, often most aesthetically pleasing items are blocked behind challenging boss encounters that require either a display of skill or cooperation with other players to obtain. It becomes competitive as players' desire for uniqueness to stand out from the rest of the player base encourages others to try and obtain these items first. Lastly, a massive player base means that there are enough players to support cooperative gameplay. Cooperative gameplay does not have to be limited to just combat, but combat is the most common. Cooperative gameplay could mean engaging in the world chat, participating in the economy, or even being part of the world. It's interesting to describe cooperative gameplay because when we take a look at cooperation, it means that there must be a mutual assistance in working towards a common goal. But what is that goal exactly? When entering into an MMO, you are actively participating in making the MMO a living, breathing world. The general consensus of the MMO community is that when you play, you are now doing your part in expanding the world and its inhabitants. No one wants to play a dead MMO. Without other players, there would be no competitive community or cooperative gameplay. So when players log in to see the many of other players who also log in to be part of the MMORPG world, the goal isn't to complete your daily or to grind to your next level. The goal is to work in cooperation to make the MMORPG feel as alive as possible. Then comes the RPG bit that describes the RPG elements of the MMORPG. Traditionally, RPGs include leveling up, getting more powerful, getting better items and gear, and obtaining new skills to strike down your enemies. Additionally, RPGs normally include role-playing as the character you're playing as, and pretending to be part of the world you're in. RPGs even branch off into other subcategories of the genre, such as action RPGs, JRPGs or Japanese RPGs, and CRPGs or computer RPGs. And MMORPGs can fall into this subcategory as well. If we dive even further, the term RPG stands for role-playing game. The term role-playing, as is described by Wikipedia, is the changing of one's behavior to assume a role, either unconsciously to fill a social role, or consciously to act out an adopted role. The term role-playing as we know today came from early Dungeons & Dragons tabletop games, and as we know, Dungeons & Dragons is known for players role-playing as their character in an attempt to disconnect from the real world and fully engage in whatever story or adventure the Dungeon Master has for them. Many have their reasons for playing tabletop Dungeons & Dragons. Some play to fulfill a fantasy, some may play because they like spending time with their friends, some may play for the thrill of adventure, but at the end of the day, it is all in good fun. I won't go into the history, but we know that the first ever role-playing game was made for the computer, and was an entirely text-based game based on Dungeons & Dragons tabletop games. It was meant as a way to streamline the Dungeons & Dragons experience of choice-based gameplay, without the hassle of gathering a group of friends, setting up the meeting, or even setting up the tabletop game itself. It was meant as a way for a player to quickly disconnect from the real world by engaging in enticing stories and adventures that you could affect the outcome of with your choices and actions. As the genre and technology evolved, we saw the use of user interfaces, music, and graphics all used in the hopes of further deepening your experience playing a role-playing game. And although the RPG genre was great at telling stories and having individuals experience a grand adventure, fulfilling the niche of disconnecting from the real world, it had one major flaw. It was single-player. Dungeons & Dragons tabletop games was meant to be a cooperative experience where you can engage with friends or other like-minded individuals. You were meant to play with others and engage with one another. No amount of AI scripting or AI party members could ever replace an actual human being. Which leads to the MMORPG. It is clear that the MMORPG genre was invented in the goal of streamlining the role-playing experience with a group of players. To create a world in which you, your friends, and other like-minded individuals could experience together and go on a grand adventure, telling the stories of how you survived an encounter with the Goblin King with only 1 HP left, or how you and a small band of other inexperienced adventurers came together to take down the large troll blocking your path from one village to the next. The MMORPG genre was created so that the need of an experienced dungeon master wouldn't be necessary, and that the dungeon master of the game would simply be the developers. Graphics were used so that fans of the role-playing genre no longer needed to imagine descriptive storytelling. Instead, everything would be laid out in front of them. As mentioned earlier, the MMORPG is an extension to the RPG genre, rather than a genre on its own. In other words, if there was never the RPG, there never would have been the MMORPG. And as we know, the RPG genre was created in the goal of streamlining the Dungeons & Dragons experience. I personally have never played Dungeons & Dragons myself, but it is easy to see the success the tabletop game had. So much success, in fact, that even today there are huge followings and successful YouTube channels that revolve around Dungeons & Dragons. And needless to say, Dungeons & Dragons was so successful that it spawned an entire genre of gaming. It is clear that in order to define what an MMORPG is, it goes more than just explaining the acronym. The genre of the MMORPG is actually so complex and varied and big that not even an acronym could simplify what an MMORPG actually is. When people explain their fun times that they've had playing an MMORPG, they talk about being there defeating Arthas for the first time, or being there as the Dark Portal first opened. These are the memorable experiences that developers scripted into the game, and were meant as a way for players to finally flex the culmination of power that they've worked so hard to obtain. And so when new players hear of these experiences, it is expected that when they jump into the game, they want to get to the fun part of the game as fast as possible. However, these grand scripted events completely overshadow all other experiences that the player went through before finally partaking in the event. What about the other memorable experiences that the developers couldn't possibly script into the game? The natural events that occur in the game because the community came together and agreed that certain levels of interactions would make for a more enjoyable experience. I'm referring to the simple things, such as random dance parties, making fun conversation, and just participating in whatever shenanigans the community is up to. Or how about the natural engagement one would have with others by playing the game and acting on player empathy, such as when a random player jumped in to help you as you were fighting one too many mobs? Or how about when you were walking down a path and a random stranger approached you, waved, gave you a friendly stat boosting buff, and went on their merry way? Or how about when you bumped into another player, asked to group up in order to defeat a boss, and now you two are still friends till this day? These types of interactions contribute to as one of the pillars that define an MMORPG. An MMORPG is a platform in which you can collect fun, engaging, and memorable experiences, and experiences like the ones just mentioned are genuine and came from a game that was designed in a way that encouraged interaction. Sometimes, it's even hard to explain why we enjoy MMORPGs, because the feelings we have go beyond the reasoning for why we play games in the first place. Do we play video games to have fun? To flex our skills to other players in a competitive environment? Do we challenge oneself and continue improving on a skill? To engage in a mindless activity to forget about the challenges of real life? It is hard to pinpoint an answer, and this subject is better left for another video. What an MMORPG is, I believe, is defined by the things we do in the game of an MMORPG world. Like how Dungeons & Dragons allowed you to be whoever you want, to do whatever you want, depending on the DM, I believe MMORPGs were meant to be the platform to truly express yourself outside of the real world. In MMORPGs, we create our character, roleplay it, baby it, and nurture it to gain more power because power is correlated to survival, and survival is second nature. We want to survive in a world that is completely unknown, where there are mysteries all around us and danger could be lurking just around the corner, so that we can just continue our journey a little bit longer, so that we can disconnect from the real world just a little bit longer. Learning new professions such as mining, fishing, and cooking all serve as a way of helping survive our next encounter. The act of gaining power is thrilling and exciting. It means that more adventures await us beyond the land in which we've become accustomed to. The act of overcoming one's difficult challenges through the use of learning, skill, and/or item progression is fulfilling. Getting new and better items and showcasing them to your friends is rewarding. Having an identity with characteristics that make you unique is satisfying, knowing that you fulfill a certain niche or knowing that you are one of a handful of people that can perform a specific task or skill. Traveling and discovering a new world is entrancing, and when the odds are stacked against us, finding a group of like-minded individuals is comforting. It is comforting to know that there are others in this world experiencing what you are experiencing. It is comforting to know that there are others in this world with similar goals who are willing to help in cooperation because they know that the challenges that lay ahead are too great to face alone. It is comforting to see a world that is lived in and full of life with interesting conversation or witty banter in the chat box. Because being alone in the real world is painful. Because combating loneliness by trying to surround yourself with people may sometimes never work. Because sometimes friendships never come easy, and finding someone to make a connection with takes effort beyond just putting on the mask that you use for acceptable social interactions. Combating loneliness is finding connections with other people who share your same interests, goals, and experiences. MMORPGs became one of the best acceptable ways of expressing oneself. MMORPGs made it easy to find others who shared your same interests and goals. They offer a unique platform for individuals to freely express themselves without the pressure of social norms, insecurities about their appearance, or fear of saying something that may harm their identity. Here, you can be whoever you want, do anything you want, and meet whoever you want. The world in which you explore with thousands of other players online becomes your connection to others. And knowing that you're surrounding yourself with thousands of other people that share your same interests makes the world a little less lonely. Let's start a discussion. If you found any of my ideas agreeable or disagreeable, leave your comments down below. If you enjoyed the content, be sure to leave a like and subscribe for more. It allows for the video to reach a larger audience so that we can get more like-minded individuals to come together and share their opinions and views of the gaming industry, and to join in on the discussion. It also lets me know that there are people out there willing to listen to my thoughts, and it encourages me to create more content like this one. As always, thanks for watching, and have a great day.